Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be digging into the work and life philosophy of someone really remarkable, Kazuo Inamori, often called the business saint.
Yeah, his story is quite something, isn't it? Came from, well, pretty humble roots. Founded not just one, but two Fortune 500 companies, Kyocera and KDDI.
And didn't he also turn around Japan Airlines?
He did. Came out of retirement, age 78, took over this bankrupt airline, and boom, back to profitability in just 1 year. It's almost unbelievable.
Definitely a story worth diving into. So our main source today is his book, Schwan. How would you translate that, roughly?
It's something like The Way to Work or maybe How to Work, but it's not your typical business manual, you know?
It's more personal.
Exactly. It really gets into his unique philosophy on work, on life. And he apparently wrote it specifically thinking about young people, new professionals, folks just trying to figure things out.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive in. We want to take his ideas, his experiences from the book, and to kind of view them through the lens of questions a lot of young people have today about work and life.
Yeah, sort of use his journey, his lessons, as maybe a guide or a different perspective for navigating some of those challenges you might be facing yourself.
We've picked out 6 key questions his work seems to speak to. First, what do you do when you feel like your career is off to a terrible start?
A big one.
Yeah. Second, is work just drudgery? Just something you have to endure? Third, how can you actually find work you genuinely love?
The million-dollar question for many.
Totally. Fourth, what kind of attitude or approach does the workplace actually value in young people? Fifth, how do you cope with that feeling of mental exhaustion, that sort of internal friction?
That Jingshin Neihao we hear so much about, yeah.
Exactly. And finally, the big one, based on his whole life, what's the secret to happiness both in work and in life?
That's quite a set of questions. They really hit on some core anxieties, don't they? But Inamori's perspective, even if it challenges some modern thinking, is, well, incredibly insightful and surprisingly practical.
Let's jump into that first one then. Dealing with that awful beginning. The source calls it a sky collapsing start. How do you handle that?
It's funny we start here because Inamori himself, this massively successful guy, had a really, really rough start. You might think success like his comes easy, but the book shows something totally different.
Yeah, it really wasn't smooth sailing. He failed the entrance exam for the university he really wanted to go to.
Right, ended up at just a regular local university studying engineering. And even though he worked like crazy there, got good grades, finding a job afterwards was a nightmare.
No big companies wanted him.
None. Rejected again and again, he finally got a job through a teacher's connection at this tiny, struggling company in Kyoto, Matsukaze Industries. They made insulators.
Insulators. Not exactly cutting-edge tech back then, I imagine. Not at all. And the company itself. It was apparently on the brink of bankruptcy when he joined. Things were so bad they couldn't even pay salaries his first month there.
Wow. That's grim.
The book even mentions local shopkeepers looking at him with pity, saying things like, "How'd you end up here? You won't even find a wife working at a broken place like this." Talk about a rough welcome.
That sounds incredibly demoralizing. And I think that feeling disappointment, starting way behind, feeling like you've already messed up, it resonates with so many people entering the workforce now. You see it all over online forums, right? People talking about terrible job markets, feeling stuck, that sky collapsing start feeling.
Absolutely. And Inamori's first reaction, totally relatable. He was indignant, felt life was unfair. Why am I always so unlucky? He kept asking himself. First the university, now this job.
He questioned things, complained.
Oh yeah, questioned society, complained constantly about the company with the other new hires who started with him. Just like you'd see on Reddit today, basically.
So he wasn't instantly philosophical about it. Not at all. But here's the pivot. All those colleagues he started with, they couldn't stand it. They all quit within a year.
But he stayed.
He was the only one left. Not because he suddenly loved it, mind you. He described himself as just kind of drifting along, stuck. But being stuck, being, as this source says, cornered, that forced him to think.
A moment of clarity.
Yeah. He writes, being cornered like this, I sobered up. He realized he had a choice. Keep complaining, eventually quit like everyone else, or do something different. He chose not to quit. Instead, he decided to fundamentally change his attitude.
Shifting the focus inward, not blaming the circumstances, but changing his response. Why?
It was pretty practical, actually. He figured if he quit just because he hated this specific environment, what guarantee was there the next place would be better? He might face the same issues. So, without a really strong reason to leave, he thought, okay, I'll accept this reality and I'll give it everything I've got right here. Go all out, see what happens.
So it wasn't about sudden passion for insulators, but a conscious decision about his own effort.
Exactly. And that decision changed everything. He stopped complaining, poured all his energy into the job. He tackled it with sincerity, with a fighting spirit, he calls it. No looking for shortcuts, no slacking off a Joe as they say now.
If he didn't know something,
He learned it. Something was hard. He figured out how to do it. He just dug in.
it sounds like taking total ownership, regardless of the external mess, like finding that core self the source mentions.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's like he decided, okay, the world isn't perfect, but I control my effort. I control my attitude. He stopped being passive and became active, starting with the work right in front of him.
And the results. Did things actually change?
The source calls it an unbelievable change. Remember, he was doing inorganic chemistry research, which wasn't his major and not his interest, but by throwing himself into it with this new mindset, learning, experimenting, pushing, he started getting amazing results, consistently. He quickly became known in that field.
Wow. So the external success followed the internal shift. What about how he felt?
That changed completely, too. He said all his confusion and doubts just disappeared. And here's the part that sounds almost strange today. He said he found the work so interesting, so much fun, couldn't even describe it.
Fun. That work. In that company. I could hear people thinking, was he just a workaholic beast of burden? Did he just learn to love suffering? It seems so counter to how many feel about work now.
It really does. But Inamori insists. Before that attitude shift, life felt like one setback after another. After he committed fully to the work, he felt his life entered this virtuous cycle. Things started clicking. And soon after that intense period, his first real major success came along.
So it wasn't luck. It wasn't some magic moment. It was the direct result of that internal change plus massive effort.
Exactly. The source stresses this wasn't a movie script turnaround. It was grounded, persistent effort, dozens or even hundreds of times more effort than others, he says, fueled by that fundamental shift in attitude.
That story is incredible. And it leads perfectly to our next question. Why did he develop such a positive, almost reverent view of work? If it started so badly, what did he discover? Is work just about being a beast of burden, Husoti?
It's a good moment for listeners to pause and ask themselves, really, why do you work? The default answer for many is obvious, right? Money, survival, paying the bills.
And online, you see that amplified. Work is framed as this necessary evil. People call themselves or basically powerless laborers. Jobs are bullshit jobs, just stuff you endure.
And look, with the pressures people face today, cost of living, job insecurity, that feeling is totally understandable. It's real.
But Inamori's book, even back in 2009, was addressing a similar vibe he saw in Japan.
Yeah, he was worried. He saw young people increasingly trying to avoid hard work. He saw more temporary workers, freelancers just scraping by, which he thought was a big social problem. He felt the post-bubble economy had eroded the traditional value placed on sweating labor, on finding dignity and effort.
And people were maybe looking for easier ways to get ahead.
Right. Seeking unearned gains, speculation, instead of building value through work. This really bothered him. He actually said his main reason for writing the book was to teach young people the real purpose and meaning of work.
Okay, so if it's not just about money, what is the main purpose according to him?
He absolutely agrees supporting yourself is vital, but it should never be the only reason. For Inamori, the primary purpose of work is internal growth. It's about refining your mind, your spirit when.
Work is self-cultivation.
Exactly. He says, and I'm quoting roughly from the source here, diligent work, day after day, has this tremendous power to train our minds and elevate our humanity. He sees the daily grind not as punishment, but as a path to becoming a better person.
He also had this interesting idea about where the work is suffering idea came from, didn't he?
Yes, he traced it back to Western influence, specifically connecting it to Christian thought and the Adam and Eve story. Labor as a punishment for original sin.
Which, he argued, created this inherently negative view of work.
Precisely. Leading to modern labor ideas focused on minimizing the pain, less hours, more pay. He felt this wasn't Japan's original view, arguing that historically, Japanese culture found genuine joy and pride in diligent work. He blamed Westernization for shifting that perspective.
It's a bold claim. But clearly for him, this wasn't just theory. His belief in work's power was deep.
Absolutely. He uses almost hyperbolic language, calling work a cure-all, a panacea. He truly believed work could turn your life around, pull you out of hardship, bring hope.
And it comes back to his own story again.
Completely. His early life was full of struggles. That moment he decided to commit to his job at Matsukaze, that's when he felt his wheel of fate started turning in a positive direction. His own experience convinced him that serious work has this almost magical power.
Okay, but the skeptic in me, or maybe someone listening might say, great for him, but that sounds like survivor bias. What about all the people who work incredibly hard and still end up burned out or miserable?
That's a fair challenge. And the source author acknowledges it directly. They're not saying you have to accept Inamori's view as the absolute truth. Life experience varies, values differ. Maybe he's right for him, maybe your experience points elsewhere.
So what's the takeaway then, if not blind acceptance?
The source frames it as a challenge, or maybe an invitation, it asks. If you've never truly gone all in, never fully committed yourself to your work without reservation, haven't you, in a way, denied yourself the chance to test this miraculous power he talks about? Aren't you even a little curious to see if it holds any truth for you?
Reframing it as a personal experiment, not about believing, but about trying.
Exactly. And they add another layer. Even if you give it your absolute all, pour everything in, and still don't achieve the external success you wanted, well, at least when you look back, you'll know you didn't hold back. You can remember failing, maybe, but failing loudly and grandly, having truly participated. Isn't there value in that experience itself?
That really shifts the focus. It's not just about the result, but the quality of the engagement, the internal growth. It connects right back to his idea of work, elevating the spirit.
It does. Which leads us nicely into the third big question. If work can be more than just a paycheck, how do you actually find work you like? The kind of work that unlocks this potential.
This is such a common struggle, isn't it? I don't know what I like. I'd be good at my job if I enjoyed it. I just need to find my passion, that heaven-sent job.
And Inamori's answer here is pretty direct, maybe even a bit jarring. He says, essentially, hashasir, which
Wow.
means your heaven-sent job isn't something you just stumble upon by chance. It's something you create with your own hands.
Wow, okay. So stop looking, start making.
Pretty much. He suggests that constantly switching jobs, hoping to find the perfect fit, is like looking for a needle in a haystack. The real power, he argues, lies in changing your mindset to actively like the job you already have.
Right, I can immediately hear people objecting. Force myself to like a job I hate, no matter how awful. Isn't that just setting myself up for misery, seeking out suffering?
And the source anticipates this pushback. It clarifies. Inamori isn't saying you should embrace a truly toxic or impossible situation. Of course, everyone wants better pay, less work, an easier commute. He gets that.
So what's the real point then?
The deeper idea is this. Often, the job you have right now is, realistically, the best option available considering your current skills and circumstances. Complaining or slacking off won't improve things. The key lever you can pull is internal. Change your mindset, adapt, immerse yourself, and yes, deliberately learn to like it through that immersion. He believes this process is what ultimately leads you to what you want, either fulfillment where you are or the growth needed to move somewhere better.
It still sounds incredibly challenging if the job feels genuinely bad. Liking it feels miles away.
And that's exactly why his own story is the proof of concept. Remember Matsukaze Industries, last resort job, failing company, field he didn't know or care about initially. Terrible resources, no mentors. Objectively, a very tough place to love your job.
So how did he bridge that gap from hating it to actually enjoying it?
He was strategic. He knew he couldn't just instantly love it, so his first goal was simpler. He had to stop hating it. And his method for that was intense focus on the task at hand, controlling what he could control, his effort.
And what did that effort look like in practice with the ceramics research?
The source paints a vivid picture, starting from absolute zero, going to the university library, finding every relevant paper, copying key parts into notebooks by hand. He even ordered papers from the American Ceramic Society and translated them himself using a dictionary.
Wow, that's dedication.
Then it became this cycle. Read theory, do experiments, analyze results, go back to theory, do more experiments, over and over. The source calls it tedious, maybe, but incredibly grounded and earnest work.
That sounds exhausting, honestly. It must have taken huge willpower.
It did, especially at first. He admits he had to force himself. But, and this is the absolute key, as he kept doing it, as he immersed himself deeply in those concrete, detailed tasks, something shifted. He found himself getting genuinely interested. He started to like the research. Eventually, he didn't need to force himself anymore. The interest itself propelled him.
So the liking followed the effort. It wasn't the prerequisite.
Exactly. That's Inamori's core advice on finding work you like. Don't focus on finding it. Focus on making the work you have into something you like through deep engagement and a changed mindset.
That flips the whole script on career searching.
It really does. The practical takeaway is, if you can't change the situation, change your response. Get grounded, breathe. Focus on the small, real tasks in front of you. Do them well, sincerely. The change in feeling will follow, he argues.
And he's quite critical of just waiting for the perfect situation.
Very. He believed if you're stuck thinking work is just something someone else makes me do, you'll always feel like a victim, always suffering. Searching endlessly for that liked job externally is like chasing a castle in the air. It's often futile and just leads to anxiety because you're looking outside for an internal feeling.
So rather than chasing the fantasy,
Invest that energy right where you are. Dive into your current work, even the mundane parts. The fulfillment you're looking for might actually be hidden within the process itself, not in some imagined future job.
that's a strong call for presence and engagement.
Okay.
Shifting from individual effort to how we interact at work. This brings us to question 4. What kind of young people are actually favored in the workplace? What attitude makes a difference?
A very practical question. The source author says they get asked this a lot, especially when jobs are scarce. People want to know how to stand out.
And the author's answer links back to that idea of having your own universe and something called positive attention bias.
Right. The simple answer is pretty universal. Basically, nobody dislikes a positive, upward-looking young person. There's an energy there that's naturally attractive. And Inamori has a similar way of thinking about this energy dynamic at work.
He talks about the self-igniting people.
Yes, and he contrasts them really sharply with the tapoku, the non-burning type. These are the people he describes as kind of nihilistic, always indifferent, unable to get fired up about anything work-related.
And they don't just lack fire themselves, they dampen others.
Exactly. They pour cold water on enthusiasm. They're cold as ice, he says. Working with them is tough. Inamori actually felt very strongly about this. His blunt take, quoted in the source, was basically, these non-burning types. We really don't need them in the company.
Ouch. That's pretty direct. So what makes someone self-igniting?
They're proactive. They don't wait to be told what to do. They don't just work because they got an order, shu. They take initiative before being asked, sure. The drive comes from within. They light their own fire.
The source author gives some relatable examples from teaching, right?
Yeah, they talk about being in class. Some students have their hands up, eager to participate. Others are trying to shrink down, avoid eye contact, maybe giving that dismissive sidelong glance. Or in research teams, some students proactively think, suggest ideas, push things forward. Others treat the advisor like a cat playing with a mouse, avoiding them, scared of getting more work. It's obvious which type usually makes more progress.
It paints a clear contrast. Engagement versus avoidance.
And there's a more detailed story in the source about someone called Small A and their really gloomy colleague. It shows the impact clearly.
What was that situation?
This colleague was just perpetually negative air, always complaining about the company, the work, pulling people aside during any downtime, spreading gossip too, who got promoted unfairly, who was related to whom, saying the company was doomed.
Just a constant downer.
Totally. And in meetings, if someone suggested something positive, this colleague would be the first to shoot it down. There's a specific example where Small A was working late on something urgent, and the colleague scoffed, saying something like, seriously, what's the point? How much extra pay will you get for one day? Who are you trying to impress?
Wow, that's incredibly toxic. Designed to undermine motivation.
Right. And Small A admitted it worked. This colleague's negativity really dragged down their enthusiasm and efficiency. Just seeing them made the whole atmosphere feel gloomier. A classic non-burning person.
So what's the advice then for dealing with people like that? Or maybe even spotting those tendencies in ourselves?
The source author is pretty direct. Look, unless you're independently wealthy, have a mine at home, you're probably working because you need something from it. Income, experience, whatever. So you need to be vigilant. around these non-burning types. 3 key things. Don't join their complaining sessions. Don't feed the negativity. Second, minimize contact, keep a healthy distance, and third, crucially, don't let their words get inside your head. I'm sure.
That last one sounds like the hardest part.
It is, but the reasoning is vital. If you spend your energy focusing on their negativity, letting it drag you down, making you resentful, who suffers? You do. You're wasting your time, your energy, your focus. It's about protecting your own inner state.
Protecting that inner state. That leads perfectly into our 5th question, which feels so relevant today. How do you deal with mental exhaustion, that internal friction, feeling drained by your own thoughts?
It really does feel like a thing is almost standard issue now, doesn't it? You hear phrases like, how can anyone not go crazy from work? It captures that feeling of constant mental drain.
It's almost expected. What's Inamori's take on combating this?
He has a really clear principle for cutting through it. Basically, do not indulge in emotional worries.
Emotional worries. What does he mean by that exactly?
He means the stuff that happens after a failure or setback. The endless dwelling, the replaying, if only I'd done this, why did that happen? Agonizing over letting people down. That kind of unproductive mental churning, he says, is the pointless.
It doesn't actually solve anything.
Right. It just needlessly adds to your own troubles. It's suffering without purpose.
Okay, so if dwelling is out, what's the constructive approach when things go wrong?
It's very action-oriented. First, seriously analyze why you failed. Understand the root causes may ka. Get clear on the lessons learned. But, and this is key, after that serious reflection, you always say, just forget it. Let go of the emotional charge. Then you turn towards new goals and act with hope and a cheerful spirit.
Analyze, learn, release the emotion, move forward positively.
That's the essence. It fits perfectly with that phrase the source author mentions. Feya, the opposite of anxiety, is concrete action. They suggest focusing only on ukuwaya, concrete worries, emotional worries. Just brush them off like dust.
Can you give an example of concrete versus emotional worries at work?
Sure. A concrete worry is about the task. How can I best structure this client pitch? Or what specific steps do I need to take this week to advance this project? These worries lead to planning and doing.
And the emotional ones?
Those are about the feelings or consequences related to the outcome. Oh no, if I don't land this client, my boss will think I'm useless, how embarrassing, or if this project is late, I'll lose my bonus and look bad. See the difference? They're focused on potential shame, judgment, loss, not the work itself. Those are the useless worries you need to recognize and try to dismiss.
Okay, recognizing them is one thing, but actually stopping that loop, that feels hard. Someone might think, easy for you to say, but my brain just gets stuck there. I can't just forget it.
Totally understandable. And the source actually brings in a simple tool from psychology to help with this, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Specifically, its basic ABC model.
Ah, CBT, how does that apply here?
The ABC model helps you see the connection. A is the activating event, the trigger. B is your belief or cognition, your thought about the event. C is the consequence, your feeling or behavior. So take the client example. A, not landing the client. B, the thought, this means I'm a failure and my boss will definitely criticize me. C, feeling anxious, ashamed, stuck in that mental drain. Now, most people think A causes C directly, the event made me feel bad. But CBT says, no, A is just the trigger. It's your belief, B, about A that really causes C.
So it's not the failure, but my interpretation of the failure that causes the distress.
Exactly. And that's why you gain control. If your belief B is irrational or unhelpful, it creates the negative consequence C. By challenging and changing your belief B, you can change the consequence C.
How would that work with a client example, challenging the belief?
You'd question it. Is it really 100% certain my boss will definitely criticize me, or is that my anxiety talking? Then take concrete steps. Maybe calmly discuss the situation with your boss, focusing on facts. Here's the prep I did. Here's how I responded to their points. Emphasize you gave your best effort. Even if the result wasn't ideal, a reasonable leader might understand. And even if they do criticize, you can reframe that too. Challenge the catastrophic thinking. Okay, so I got criticized. Does one setback mean I'm totally incompetent? No. Everyone fails sometimes. If my boss judges my entire worth on this one thing, maybe that says more about their leadership style.
That definitely takes the sting out of it, reduces the power of the worry.
Exactly. By actively questioning those negative assumptions, the emotional intensity naturally decreases. The source points out this is just a quick look at CBT, but it's a powerful technique that complements Inamori's advice to focus on the concrete and ditch the emotional baggage.
This has been fascinating. We've covered handling bad starts, rethinking work's purpose, making work likable, workplace attitudes, managing exhaustion. And it all seems to point towards a bigger goal, right? Happiness. That brings us to our final question. According to Inamori, what is the secret to happiness in work and life?
This is really the culmination. Drawing on his entire life, Inamori offers what he calls his life equation. This, he believes, is the formula that guided him, an ordinary person by his own account, to extraordinary success and fulfillment.
The life equation. Okay, lay it on us.
It's a multiplication. Ha'ebo al-lu, or in English, life and work result, mindset, enthusiasm, ability.
Mindset times enthusiasm times ability. Let's unpack those. Ability.
Ability is basically your raw material, your innate talents, intelligence, physical health, things you're mostly born with or develop early. Think of it like a score from 0 to 100.
Okay. Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm is your effort, your drive, passion, how hard you work, your persistence. This isn't fixed, it's something you cultivate. Also scored 0 to 100 in his model.
So, ability and enthusiasm are positive contributors, but mindset is different.
Yes, mindset is the game changer. It's the most critical part. And unlike the others, its scale runs from -100 all the way to +100. It can be negative.
Ah, so a negative mindset can actually cancel out talent and effort.
Completely sabotage it. The source lists positive mindsets: being constructive, cooperative, cheerful, kind, sympathetic, generous, honest, humble, diligent. These give you a positive score.
And the negative ones.
Being cynical, complaining constantly,
Yeah.
rejecting sincerity, these drag your score into the negative.
And because it's multiplication.
That's the kicker. Even if you have amazing ability, 100, and incredible enthusiasm, 100, giving you a potential of 10,000. If your mindset is negative, even just slightly negative, like -10, your final result is -100,000. All that talent, all that effort, completely wiped out, even resulting in a negative outcome.
That's sobering. It places immense responsibility on our internal attitude.
That's Inamori's core belief. Looking back on his life, he felt this equation was the only reason for his success. He considered himself an ordinary person, no special gifts, no family advantages. This wasn't just theory for him. It was the practical reality that enabled him to achieve so much.
And the source author connected with this personally too, right?
Deeply. They agreed wholeheartedly with the formula. They described themselves as having average intelligence and physical ability. They struggled through poverty to get educated, faced countless hardships, to eventually become a university teacher.
Another ordinary person's story.
Exactly. And having navigated those difficulties, the author felt Inamori's equation rang profoundly true. In their toughest times, it wasn't exceptional talent that got them through, but that positive, determined mindset, that feeling of, gritting your teeth and climbing step by step.
It really brings the formula down to earth. It's not just for CEOs, it's for anyone facing life's challenges. It suggests that while we might not control our starting ability or all the factors affecting enthusiasm, our mindset is where our greatest power lies.
And that choice of mindset, Inamori believed, is the ultimate determinant not just of work success, but of life's happiness.
Wow. This deep dive into Kazuo Inamori's tune has been so insightful. We've seen how a tough start at talk can be turned around not by changing the outside, but by changing the inside attitude and effort. We've explored seeing work not as just usury drudgery, but as a real path for personal growth.
We've learned that loving your work might be less about finding it and more about creating that feeling through deep engagement right where you are. We've understood the value of being self-igniting and the importance of guarding your energy against negativity, vacation influences.
And we got practical advice on tackling that mental friction by focusing on concrete problems, instead of drowning in emotional worries. Maybe using tools like that CBT model.
And finally, that powerful Otsio, the life equation. Result: mindset, enthusiasm, ability. with mindset being the absolute key, the multiplier that can make or break everything.
We really hope this exploration of Inamori's thinking, straight from the source, has offered you, our listeners, some useful insights, maybe some tools, or just a different way to look at your own work, your challenges, and your journey.
The source ends with a really nice thought, wishing that every ordinary person, like Inamori saw himself, can, through their own effort and by cultivating that positive mindset, build their own small universe and achieve fulfillment in their own unique way.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Reflecting on all this, what's one concrete, grounded step you could take today in your current situation to start actively cultivating that positive mindset and building your own path forward?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.